Boeing 787. Dreamliner. The quiet tech that rewired long haul. If I told you the Dreamliner's most important luxury isn't a bigger screen, a quieter engine, or even those giant windows, but a decision deep in the plumbing that most travelers never noticed, you might raise an eyebrow. Stay with me. By the end, I'll reveal the specific design choice that quietly explains the 787's calmer cabins, better sleep, and lower fuel burn, and why airlines keep ordering this jet even when the headlines get noisy. The 787 was built for long, thin routes, the city pairs that don't always fill a jumbo, but deserve non-stop reach. In the air, it reads like a modern long-haul flagship. On board, it feels more like a breathable human-scale space than an airborne cave. Think raked wingtips tracing a clean arc across the sky, carbon fiber skin that ditches the old corrosion drama, and an interior that carries itself with the confidence of good lighting and measured acoustics. That first breath when you step in, cool, quiet, not bone dry, isn't an accident. It's the airplane's core philosophy made tangible. Overview: what the 787 is really for. The Dreamliner family spans 3 sizes. The -8 is the compact ocean crosser. The -9 is the sweet spot workhorse. And the -10 is the stretch optimized for high-demand medium-long segments where range is important but capacity wins the economics. All 3 share the same wingspan and the same intent. Make long-haul feel less like endurance and more like travel. In practice, that means an airplane that settles into an efficient Mach 0.85 groove, holds its ride shape when the air gets lumpy, and lands you with a face that doesn't look like it was stored in a dehydrator. Part of the magic is simple geometry. The windows sit high enough to keep the horizon in view, which calms your inner ear. The overheads swallow modern carry-ons without wrestling. The LED lighting isn't a gimmick. When it's used well, sunrise and sunset cues ease your body into time zones instead of punching it there. All of that earns style points, but it's the atmosphere that changes your day. Lower cabin altitude and higher humidity make a red-eye feel like a late night, not a mountain trek. When a cabin lets you sleep and wake without a desert in your throat, you start to understand why this jet keeps a fan club. Inside the cabin, the part you can feel. Walk aboard, and the first thing that hits is scale without glare. The entryway opens wide, the ceiling vaults just enough to avoid tunnel vibes, and those windows, tall, generous, and smooth, take over. Instead of yanking a plastic shade, you tap the button and the outside world dims through smart glass. You still see cloud textures at the darkest setting. You just don't get blasted. I've flown on nights where the cabin is soaked in that deep blue dusk, and conversations become soft-spoken by reflex. That's design doing its job. Air is a character in this story. The pressure is set closer to sea level than on older wide bodies, which means your sinuses don't file a complaint, and the humidity lives in a more civilized range. On very long legs, that's the difference between arriving as a human or a raisin. The ride quality also earns a mention. Sensors constantly sniff for developing bumps, and the airplane trims surfaces to blunt the vertical motion. It doesn't delete turbulence, it edits out the worst chapters. I joke that the Dreamliner is the noise-canceling headphones of airframes. You still hear the song, you just don't get the hiss. Design and materials, why the skin matters. Under the paint, the 787 structure tells a modern story. Lots of carbon fiber reinforced polymer paired with carefully placed aluminum, titanium, and steel, where those metals make sense. The composites aren't there to win trivia night. They buy a cascade of benefits: weight saved, corrosion shrugged off, and the freedom to cut larger windows without paying a fatigue penalty. Composites also make pressurization friendlier over a long service life. When you reduce the stress that repeated cycles put on the fuselage, you earn the right to run the cabin at a lower altitude and keep the moisture up without inviting the corrosion gremlins of the past. That's not marketing. That's materials science quietly making your red eye survivable. The wings keep the conversation going. They're long and slender with raked tips that look elegant even when parked. But the real win is how they load up in the air. You feel it as a calmer response to bumps and a throttle-friendly cruise that sips fuel rather than gulps it. Under the nacelles, you'll notice serrated chevrons along the trailing edge. Those scallops aren't decoration. They're there to mix the noisy jet exhaust with surrounding air more gently, trimming the footprint around airports and softening the cabin's background hush. Put simply, the airframe and the engines are collaborators, not neighbors. The electrical revolution, the hidden luxury. Here's the twist most passengers never hear about. Traditional airliners use hot, high-pressure bleed air siphoned from the engines to run pressurization and the air conditioning packs. The Dreamliner sidesteps that entirely. It's a more electric airplane that powers the environmental system and other heavy users with electricity from high-output generators. Engine start, cabin pressurization, ice protection on parts of the wing. So many jobs that used to be pneumatic or hydraulic go electric here. Why should you care? Because engines can spend more of their energy making thrust instead of plumbing the cabin, which trims fuel burn and heat losses. It also gives engineers precise control over temperature and pressure, which translates into smoother breathing, fewer dry eyes, and less of that fog of jet lag feeling on landing. This electrical backbone also changes the soundscape. Pumps and compressors can be tuned, timed, and isolated more cleanly than old bleed air surges. On a long overnight, I've sat by a window, dimmed the glass to a deep ocean blue, and noticed that the ambient sound becomes a steady, low hum rather than a cocktail of whooshes. It's a small thing, until hour 9. Then it's everything. Performance and range. Numbers that mean something. Let's translate the spec sheet into a day at work. The -8 makes true long thin routes viable, call it around 7,000 plus nautical miles with a healthy reserve. So secondary cities earn non-stop service they never had. The -9 pushes further. The quiet superstar for transoceanic networks, comfortable with the day-in, day-out ranges that keep airlines on time and profitable. The stretch -10 gives you cabin real estate and seat-mile economics on missions up to roughly 6,000 plus nautical miles, which is plenty for high-demand links across, say, the Atlantic or deep into Asia from the Middle East. All three cruise happily around Mach 0.85, where fuel economy, schedule, and headwinds make peace. Dimensions aren't trivia here. They explain behavior. A wingspan just under 200 feet, married to modern aerodynamics, sets the table for that fuel sip. Length grows across the family. Compact on the -8, more graceful on the -9, long-legged on the -10, and you feel it inside as better aisle flow, smarter galleys, and fewer service collisions during meal runs. The talent is consistency. Same wing planform, same cabin vibe, 3 sizes to fit the route. Engines, choices, and the sound of quiet. Under each wing, you'll find either General Electric's GNX-1B or Rolls-Royce's Trent 1000 lineage, depending on the airline's pick. Engine debates can devolve into fan clubs, so here's the practical lens. Both families were designed for this airframe's electrical appetite and low-drag mission. Their nacelles and those distinctive chevrons work with the wing to make departure and arrival communities happier. And they deliver the thrust you need without turning the cabin into a megaphone. On a takeoff roll, you feel power more than you hear it. It's still a jet, joyfully so, but the soundtrack has been mixed with care. Variants in the real world, city pairs, not just specs. A 787-8 opens up non-stops where a 777 might be too much airplane. Think mid-size coastal U.S. markets reaching deeper into Europe or Asia. The 787-9 is the Swiss Army knife variant. Airlines use it to knit together networks with long legs and steady demand. It's the one most travelers have probably flown without noticing. And it's the variant that made lots of "I didn't know they flew non-stop from here" routes possible. The 787-10 brings the seat-mile price down on high-demand lanes, where you don't need ultra-long range every single day. If your brain loves analogies, the -8 is the long-range coupe, the -9 is the grand tourer, and the -10 is the high-capacity fastback designed for busy corridors. Production and Program Reality. The Charleston Chapter. There's a story on the ground, too. Final assembly for the family now lives in North Charleston, South Carolina, with investment flowing into that site to hit higher monthly rates as wide-body demand rebounds. For airlines, that matters less as a zip code and more as a signal. The line is geared to build consistently and deliver airplanes that slip into fleets without drama. For travelers, the only visible evidence is that you keep seeing more Dreamliners at gates in places you didn't a decade ago. Money talk. What it costs to own the feeling. We all wonder what the price tag looks like. While real transaction prices are private and heavily negotiated, historic list prices give us a yardstick. The family ran from the high $200 million into the mid-$300 million across the three sizes before public lists were retired. Airlines rarely, if ever, pay list, and fleet deals blur the line between sticker and street. Operating economics are the true plot twist. The 787's composite weight savings, aerodynamic choices, and that more electric architecture combine to cut fuel burn versus the jets it replaced. Numbers that show up in an airline's quarterly reports long after the ribbon cutting is over. Comfort versus configuration. A quick reality check. A cabin is a canvas that airlines paint. Most carriers choose 9 abreast seating in economy on this airframe. A few go 8 for that luxury coach feel. Either way, the bones of the cabin, the windows, the air system, the lighting, the ride, stay Dreamliner. I notice the difference most at 2 a.m., when the moonlight hits the cloud tops and the cabin keeps its hush. I've cracked jokes about the windows being so big they feel like HD TVs for the sky, but the truth is simpler. They're there to remind you you're flying, not hiding. Day in the life. How a long leg actually feels. Imagine boarding a late-night departure to cross an ocean. The entryway feels like a foyer rather than a funnel. You climb to cruise, and the engines settle into a hum that drops under your thoughts. Lights ease you through faux sunset. The glass dims to a deep twilight, and the air doesn't parch your throat. You sleep, you wake. Breakfast tastes like food, not cardboard. The airplane rides out a rough pocket with a shrug, not a bounce house. You step off somewhere new feeling like yourself. That's the Dreamliner's superpower. It makes a very long trip feel like a reasonable ask. And yes, I did once try to dim the window all the way dark, and then pressed my face to it like a kid anyway. Sue me. My take. I've toured cabins with louder bragging rights, bars, showers, neon mood swings, and after the 10th long haul, your body votes with its feelings. The 787 is the grown-up choice. Quieter, kinder air, smarter energy, and a structure that turns engineering into rest. It's not trying to be a flying nightclub. It's trying to be a place you can live for 12 hours and land ready to be interesting. If I'm picking a metal tube to cross a lot of blue, I'll take the one that treats air like part of the design, not just something to push aside. The reveal. You stayed for the secret, so here it is. The Dreamliner's decisive luxury is the decision to go bleedless and more electric. That's the hidden hinge that swings open more comfortable pressure, friendlier humidity, refined temperature control, and better engine efficiency. The compound effect that explains why the windows look like a postcard and your face looks like you after 8 hours. It's not flashy, it's foundational. And it's why this airplane changed how long-haul feels. If this deep dive helped you see past the marketing and into the mechanics that make travel better, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next premiere. Want members-only polls, early access, and route breakdowns we couldn't fit here? Tap join. If this episode made your day, super thanks is the fastest way to power the next investigation. I'll shout out the sharpest supporter comment on screen. And tell me below, would you trade a few seats for 8 abreast comfort on your airline's Dreamliners? Or do you prefer 9 abreast and lower fares? Your take could steer a future comparison.